Hello, this is another tutorial. So, the last time we did this, we started off with writing our first program, and basically what we did here is we said we made a variable called a string called string storage. So it's a variable of type string called string storage. With that, we wrote text. We wrote hello world to the console. So console.writeLine wrote a line of text that said hello world to the console. And then with our string variable we created, we set it equal to whatever the user inputted. So console.readLine waits until the person types in some input, and then when the person presses enter, it gets and returns the line, and then this is equal to whatever the person wrote. And then we have here console.writeLine whatever, so it's console.writeLine with the word you said plus whatever string storage is equal to plus a period, and then console.readLine so that it doesn't close right afterwards. So this is the first program we wrote, but we're not going to go over anything new anymore. So let's go over some terminology. A string.
No, Cameron, don't play with that.
So let's go over some terminology. A string. A string variable will contain a string of characters. So a string will always contain so a string is a string of characters. That's what that is. And then a boolean. A boolean is going to, a string is always going to be true or false. So anytime you have a boolean, there's only two possible things it could be. It could be either true or it could be false. We then have an integer. An integer is pretty much a number from 0 or let's see what so an integer is a number between some half a billion to negative half a billion to some half a billion. I can't remember the original number, but an integer is a number. A float is another type of number. A double is yet another type of number. So a string is a string of characters. A boolean is going to be either true or false. An integer is a number. A float is yet another type of number. A double is another type of number as well. And there's a whole bunch of different versions. A whole bunch of them. You also have a decimal. A decimal is a number with a decimal value. See, an integer will will always do rounding, same with a float or a double. But a decimal will go up to the last decimal, to every single decimal point. So you have a string, a boolean, an integer, a float, a double, a decimal. Am I missing anything else? A char. A char is a single character. So a string is a string of characters. A char is a single character. So here's some things you just have to accept and take. Why are they this way? I'll explain that later. Just know that a string is a string of characters. A Boolean is going to be either true or false. An integer is a number. A float is another type of number. A double is yet another type of number. A decimal is a number with a decimal value. And a char is a single character. So, I don't think I'm missing anything here. So we have all of these different types. Now, what I'm going to do this time around, now that we've gone over this, just some terminology you need to do, we are going to do a conditional statement. So, we're going to create a Boolean called true or false. So, let's do an if statement. If true or false is equal to false, then console.writeLine true or false is false. So, this is a conditional. So we set a variable of type Boolean. Now this variable can only have two possible values, true or false. But what we're saying here is, if true or false is equal to false, if true or false is equal to false, console.writeLine true or false is equal to false. Else, if it's not equal to false, because there's only two possible values true or false can be, if it's not equal to false, then we can assume that it's now it's true. So, if true or false is equal to false, write true or false is false to the console window. Else, or otherwise, we're going to say that true or false is true. Now, there's an issue here. It's complaining that I'm using an unassigned local variable, true or false. We have to initialize the value, which essentially means we have to set a value to it in order for it to work. So we're going to say Boolean true or false is equal to false. So we're making a variable of true or false that's of type Boolean, and we're setting it to false. Can you stop that, please? So, if true or false is equal to false, which at this point in time, it will always be false, it's always going to say true or false is false. Let me run the program and I'll show you what I mean. So as you can see, it opened up and it closed. So what we're going to do is we're going to put console dot read line. And we're going to want this in both sections. So if it gets either value, we don't want the console application to close. When you do a conditional, a condition basically looks for something to be true. So, if true or false is equal to false, the statement here is equal to true. And if that's true, this block of code here will be executed, and it will skip over what's in this else statement. However, if true or false is not equal to true, or equal to false, sorry, and it's equal to true, it will execute this block of code, skipping this block of code up here. So let's go over that again. We set a variable called true or false of type Boolean. Because it's a Boolean, it can only be true or false. It can only be one of two things, true or false. And we're setting it to false. Now, if true or false is equal to false, we're going to execute whatever is in here, skipping anything that's here. So if true or false is equal to false, we are going to execute this code. So it's going to write true or false is false, and then console.readLine is going to keep the application from closing itself. Same what goes here. If true or false is equal to true, the statement here is false, and when the statement here is false, it goes to the else statement. So it's going to execute this block of code here, which writes true or false is true to the console window, and then console.readLine keeps the thing from closing. So if we run this, it will always say true or false is false. No matter what, it's going to say true or false is false. No matter what. If I set true or false equal to true, true or false is always going to be true. So what that means is if true or false is always equal to true, this statement here is false. It's going to check to see, okay, is true or false equal to false? No, because it's equal to true. So because this condition has been proven false, it's going to go to the else statement. So let's make an analogy here. If the person you hate insults you, do this stuff. Otherwise, if he doesn't insult you, then do this. So that's basically what's kind of the idea you're doing here. So let's run this code. Because true or false is always equal to true, it's always going to say true or false is equal to true. So true or false is true. And no matter how many times I close and open the program, it's always going to say true. So let's make this a little more variable. Let's add something here. Let's do another if statement. Except we're going to introduce a class called random. What random does is it generates a random value. So let's do a random. Random number. Whoops. Is equal to a new type of class random. So here's our class, and we have to create an instance of it. To create an instance of a class, you have to say new. So we're creating a new instance of class random. So what random would let us do is let us randomly generate a number. So random. Let's make a new variable. We're gonna call it int generated number. So we now made a new variable of type integer. So our variable is called generated number, and it's of type integer. Now remember, anytime you make a variable, they are case sensitive. You must write them exactly how you stated them, otherwise your code will not compile and you won't be calling the right thing or setting the value of the right thing at all. So we now have a variable called generated number of type integer, and we're going to say here generated number is equal to random number dot next, and we're going to give it two numbers. We're going to give it a minimum number and a maximum number. So let's do 0 to 3. One thing I've noticed with randoms is that they will never ever go to pick the last number. They'll always go between, they'll either do the first value that you put in, but they'll never ever seem to do the maximum number. If that made absolutely no sense, when it generates a random number, it picks a number between 0 and 3. In most cases, it will eventually choose 0, but it will never ever choose the max value when it generates a random number. It seems to just go between. So if you put 0, it's like it goes between -1 and 3. It never picks 3. So let's do another if statement. Actually, no. Let's not do an if statement. Let's do a switch statement. We're going to do switch generated number. So we have two types of things here. We have a conditional. Now we're dealing with a switch statement. A switch statement is kind of like a conditional, but pretty much entirely different. What a conditional does is, if my condition is met, I will execute this code. If my condition is not met, I will do this. If there wasn't an else statement, it would just do nothing. So a switch statement is different. We're going to do case. So we're going to go case generated number is 0. No, sorry. We're going to do case 0. Break. So if variable generated number is equal to 0, execute code here. Let's do another case. We said 0 to 3. So we're going to do cases up to 3. Case 2. Case 3. And I can't count. I forgot number 1. So we have 4 cases. So if the value of a variable generated number is 0, do this. If the value of generated number is 1, do this. If the value of generated number is 2, do this. The value of generated number is 3, do this. You get the point. So what we're going to do is we have our boolean here, and we want to randomly set true or false. So let's get rid of this. So we have our boolean true or false being declared, and here we're going to say true or false is equal to true. True or false equal to false. So this will always choose a random number. And based on the random number, this will make a decision on what to set true or false to. So, it's still complaining. Use of unassigned variable. Right, okay. So we're going to have this equal to something. I'll set to false. But that doesn't matter because down here it's going to randomly, it's going to flip the value and change it. So, let's run this code here. What did I do wrong? That's exactly what I did wrong. I set the wrong variable to something it didn't support. We wanted to set true or false. If you put generated number is equal to false, that is incorrect and won't compile. So, true or false is true. Let's run it again. Okay, true or false is true again. Let's do something here. Unfortunately, when you do a random number, it chooses a random number while the program's running. However, if you just start the program up, and you keep starting up each time, your random value is always going to be the same. Turns out, a random's not so random. So we're going to do a while loop. What a loop does is it will keep going and going and going until it has a reason to stop. We talked about a conditional statement, right? If true or false is equal to false, then we're going to do this. A while loop says, while this is equal to true, while this condition is true, keep doing this. Keep doing this stuff. So, when we open this up, it's going to, a loop will loop this code over and over. So once all this code is done executing, it's going to repeat the process all over again and keep doing, and it will keep executing the code that it contains. True or false is equal to false. I'm going to press enter again. And if I keep pressing enter, it keeps re-executing the code, and you can see that it's randomly setting the value true or false to true or false. So, let's try to go over this again. Just so you, if you're really lost and confused, I'll try and explain this in more depth. So, we made a while loop. A while loop will loop any code that is inside of it. So inside of this loop, we created a variable called true or false of type Boolean. Remember, a Boolean can only be true or false. Can't be anything else but true or false. Then we created a variable called generated number of type integer. Then we call upon the class called random. So, rand number, which I actually screwed up naming that. I'm going to call it random number. So, then we made a variable of type random. However, random number, in order to use this class of random, we have to create a new instance of random. So our variable random number is of type random, and it's equal to a new instance of that variable, no, of that class. And then our variable generate number, which is of type integer, it is now going to be equal to whatever value this chooses. So if this chooses 0, generated number is equal to 0. If it chooses 2, it's equal to generated number is equal to 2. Whatever, right? So then we have a switch statement, which basically says, okay, we are going to get the value of generated number. In the case that it's 0, we're going to set true or false equal to true. In the case that it's 1, true or false is going to be equal to false. In the case that generated number is equal to 2, true or false is going to be equal to true. In the case that generated number is 3, true or false is going to be equal to false. It's just going to execute whatever code is inside of it. And you can put you're not limited to what you can put inside each of these different cases. Another way I could describe a switch statement is we have 4 different scenarios. In the scenario that generated number is equal to 0, we're going to set true or false equal to true. On the scenario that is equal to 1, true or false is going to be equal to false. In the scenario that true or false is equal to 2, I screwed that up. In the case that generated number is equal to 0, true or false is going to be equal to true. And the scenario that generated number is equal to 1, true or false is going to be set to false. And the scenario that generated number is equal to 2, true or false is equal to true. And the scenario that generated number is equal to 3, true or false is going to be equal to false. And then, once we've done that, the true or false has been set. And it's going to compare true or false and see if it's equal to false. If true or false is equal to false, we are going to execute this code. If it's not equal to false, it is going to execute this code. So a switch statement bases itself off of any number of scenarios you can think of. Most cases, there's some cases where a switch statement is nicer to look at than an if statement. Because you could have replicated this exact same scenario with an if statement, but it ends up not looking as nice. And I'm not going to do it because I can say you can do it, but if I do it, there's a possibility you'll be entirely confused. I'm trying not to be too overwhelming here. So we've done 2 types of things. We've done a conditional if statement. If statements are always conditional, so here's a conditional. This is a condition. This isn't quite a conditional as it's comparing. Is generated number equal to this? Okay, it is. Do this. Is generated number equal to this? It is. Okay, let's do this. Is equal to this? Yes, okay. This? Okay. So, that's basically all I have to do here. Play around with some conditionals, play around with the switch statement, do whatever you feel confident doing, and you should eventually grasp it. Oh yes, and one more thing I forgot here. So after all this code is executed, we have this while loop. And this while loop will go as long as its condition is true. Well, when you say while true, you're basically telling it to go on forever. Because you can't, this isn't a variable, you can't change it, it will always go on forever. So, this is basically everything I have to tell you guys for this lesson here. If there's anything you want me to describe better, if I'm going too fast, just let me know, and I should hopefully be able to improve that. So, see you guys next time.